in Geneva. And thanks. And we will then go into a discussion with Sylvia and people online and wrap up with a Q&A. So the Water and Climate Coalition really is an initiative that has been launched or thought about a year ago by 9 UN agency heads and the Global Water Partnership to ensure that we have that we create activities and impact around SDG 6 global acceleration framework, but in combination with the climate agenda, because we have seen here in Glasgow that this link between the climate resilience debate and SDG 6 is so important, but yet not really on the top of the agenda, neither in the negotiations nor in what we do in practical terms in development projects, in creating more resilience. So the goal of this coalition is to bring together people to integrate water and climate agendas. And we want to reach 2 targets with the coalition. One is through this COP, the COP in Egypt, or that's likely going to be in Egypt next year, and then the 2023 Water Conference in New York. We want to create a political impact and the willingness and the disposition of people to do things differently to really provide the baseline information we need for resilient water futures. And that is against, for example, the backdrop that at the moment we are losing water from our ecosystems at a faster rate than we actually consume fresh water globally. So we are just dewaterizing our environment, and that is certainly not sustainable, neither for socio-economic development nor for climate resilience. And we also want to create an integrated water and climate stocktake with this coalition, because we are debating climate stocktake all the time, but we really have no clue where the water cycle goes at the moment, globally, regionally, and locally. And with that, of course, we need different financing arrangements, and that's why the World Bank has just joined our Water and Climate Coalition. And one big topic is the Cryosphere. That's why I wear this fancy Cryosphere pin today. So the water that we will lose from the Cryosphere, which we sadly must acknowledge is a finite resource. It's a non-renewable resource at the moment. That's another big topic, and how can we address that, and how can we provide solutions to provide alternatives for those resources that people use at the moment to produce food or to live off. So the livelihood loss that is threatened through this disappearing cryosphere. So those are the broad topics of the Water and Climate Coalition. As I said, we have a political aspiration to make an impact, where we have presidents of countries, where we have ministers, where we have UN agency heads. And then we have the coalition itself, which is the practical part of it, to actually bring people together from the private sector, from the public sector, and anybody else who is interested to showcase that we can do things differently. And one of our partners in this is UNICEF, and that's why I'm especially happy that Sylvia is here tonight. But before I talk too long, I want to hand over the floor to my colleague Michael back in Geneva, who will give you a little overview on how we have structured the possibility at the moment for people to get involved in the activity part of the coalition. So Michael, please take over the floor for the moment and introduce the activity part.
Yeah, thanks, Johannes, for this nice introduction, and welcome everyone also from my side to this event here at COP. Also welcome to all the panelists that we have online. I will give you a little introduction on the practical part of the Water and Climate Coalition. As Johannes just explained, there are kind of 2 pillars: the political pillar and the and activity part of the coalition. And this event is more focusing on the activity part of the coalition, and I will give you a 5-minute overview of the activities and the concept that we have for those activities and the engagement of all the members that we have. Let me just share my screen for a little presentation. So we have this slogan for the Water and Climate Coalition, which is called "Water action is the best answer to climate change." We don't want to say that we can stop climate change with water action, but adaptation to climate change, for that, water is really crucial because it's linking all the different parts of the ecosystem that climate change is affecting. So I'll give you a little overview, but before starting with that, we have this Mentimeter set up to make this event a bit more interactive and a bit more lively, so that also the people that are watching us on YouTube can participate. And in order to participate, you just have to go to menti.com and enter the code that we have here on the slide. It's 947764443. And we also have a first initial question for you. And the question is, what is the first word that comes to your mind when you think about water and climate change? You have some time during my presentation to answer that question, and afterwards we will have a nice word cloud. You can stay connected on Mentimeter because later in the panel discussion, you can use the Mentimeter to ask questions to the panelists. So as Johannes already explained, the Water and Climate Coalition is a cross-sectoral water action community under the SDG 6 accelerator framework. And the focus is on promoting an integrated climate and water agenda, and especially on focusing on closing the gaps that we have on hydrological data and information. And the idea is really that this coalition is driven by action and guided by political leadership. This combination of the political level and the activity level of the coalition is really important. You can see here also the structure of the coalition. We have the water and climate leaders on the one side. This is more the high level policy development impact. And on the other hand, we have the coalition members that provide tangible action and activities for water and climate. And the Water and Climate Coalition is really open for all kind of stakeholders, from scientific organizations to private sector, NGOs, UN organizations, and civil society, and also countries that want to join the Water and Climate Coalition. We have a number of founding members. They are mainly UN organizations. You can see them here on the slide. And some of those members are also here on the panel. It was started about a year ago, but the coalition is really open for new members. And it's really a growing coalition. We have more and more members that are joining the coalition. And it's really the idea to build up a community of multi-sectoral actors to join forces to implement interlinked water and climate activities. And the idea is really to create a momentum and to accelerate action to achieve the SDG 6 goals, where we are really a bit behind in achieving those goals. And the coalition is really trying to create this momentum of bringing different actors together to achieve something new, to think a bit out of the box, to not stay in our little circle that we are always staying in, but really connecting with others. So what we have established, and you can see it on our website, I will share the link later on with you. We have established what we call an activity marketplace, because the idea is well, we have so many different members from so many different areas and sectors. Well, what are they actually doing? What kind of ideas do they have? And how can I join their activities? That's why we created this activity marketplace. It's a place to join and to launch activities. So you can become a member of the Water and Climate Coalition If you have a great idea on an activity that you want to implement, just write to us. We can put it on our activity marketplace. It is visible for others, and then they can join your activity. And like that, we really want to create this momentum that I was talking about. You can see it here also. We have different activities already on the marketplace where you can have a look. Is this any interest to me? What kind of ideas do others have? And then you can write them or us, and we connect you. You have here's, for example, an example that of an activity that WMO has started. It's about climate change impact on water availability, which is a really important topic. But you can find many other activities on the marketplace that we have. And as promised, here's the link to our website. Have a look what we are doing, and join the Water and Climate Coalition and become an active member. So this was a little introduction to what the Water and Climate Coalition is doing, what the Water and Climate Coalition can serve to the general public, who can join the coalition, and how to create momentum for the SDG 6 implementation. In the panel discussion later, you can hear what the different partners are doing, what their opinion is on how to create momentum, on how to implement activities to achieve the SDG 6 goals, and to come up with an interlinked agenda of water and climate. Let's see how active our participants were and see how many of them have answered the first questions that we had to them on what is the first word that comes to your mind when you hear water and climate change. So Chiara, could you maybe share what the results were of this first question? So you can see here on the screen the little overview of this little word cloud, of this first word that comes to your mind when you hear water and climate change. And you can see here drought and floods, floodplains. So those are the typical topics that are really important when we talk about climate change. Some regions, they will have more water, which is also a disaster. Some other parts, they will have less water. They are faced with droughts. Some are faced with both of those problems, depending on the season. We have sea level rise, water pollution, hydroclimatic extremes like droughts and floods. Very important is also like water supply. So it's not only water for the ecosystem, but also like, can people have enough water, drinking water, to survive? It's also a lot about food security. There's one word, crisis. There are many different meanings for crisis. There can be a water crisis. It can also lead to a political crisis or a security crisis if we don't have enough water or too much water. So thanks a lot to the audience for those first words. And maybe this can also help the panelists to stimulate a discussion. Chiara, can you go to the next slide, please? So I will soon hand over to Johannes and the panelists for the panel discussion. And during the panel discussion, you can again use the Mentimeter to write questions that you have to the panelists. Just write it. We will collect it, and then we will show the questions on the screen from time to time so that the panelists can pick up the questions. With that, I hand over to Glasgow, to Johannes, and we go ahead with the panel discussion. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, and the whole team back in Geneva. This is, of course, a new feature in COPs or in generally how we work now. We have to build in Mentimeters and other tools to allow online participants to actually do something and not just be out there and be sprayed with our wisdom, but actually to try to make it more interactive for our participants who can't be with us today. So I would like to start the panel discussion, and we have on the panel today Tom Williams. He works for the World Business Council of Sustainable Development and has kindly agreed to discuss with us. We have Valentin Eich from the Global Water Partnership, who works with us and Global Water Partnership really on this interlinkage between water and climate topics, between the more technical World Meteorological Organization issues in water and hydrology and the community reach that the Global Water Partnership has. We have Eddie Moores here, who is the rector of IHE, Water Education Institute in Delft in the Netherlands, maybe the most important graduate and postgraduate institute for international water education. And last but not least, and live here in Glasgow, Sylvia from UNICEF, who will contribute really on the WASH topics and WASH agenda. And we had planned to also have a contribution from Liz Mullen-Bernard from UNEP, but she sent an email just briefly before our event here that she doesn't feel very good and that she will probably not be able to participate. So I suspect that she's not online at the moment, and I don't know if her colleague Joachim Harlin received.
I'm here.
You are here. Okay, Joachim, very good to have you online. So Joachim works in UNEP. He's a senior water person. Many of you know him from World Water Weeks, and he was actually one of the people who kicked off the whole discussion on the global acceleration framework for SDG 6. So with Joachim, we really have a person in the panel and online that has been there from the start and has developed with us and for us also, thanks Joachim, all the agenda that we discussed now today. And Joachim, maybe I'll address you first. Why do you think water is such an effective answer to the problems that climate change poses? And can you also, because we know that we've had 21 years of climate negotiations to come to the Paris Agreement, and ever since 5 other years of annual or almost annual with COVID crisis, intergovernmental negotiations and meetings on the climate stocktake process. And why do we have the feeling, or why does it seem that water is a bit lagging behind, although such an important agent in the resilience and adaptation debate? Floor is over to you, Joachim.
Thank you very much, and I'm very pleased to be with you, even if I'm here in Nairobi a little bit remotely with some fireworks in the background. Well, water is often seen and felt as the medium in which climate change, the climate in general, expresses itself. So, and we know that water is sustaining everything living on the planet. And therefore, obviously, if we see changes to the hydrological cycle, the way that water is distributed in time and space, also changes in the mean runoff, changes in seasonality, interannual variability, intensity, extreme events like floods and droughts. You mentioned the cryosphere, Johannes, obviously very important, you know, how snow is accumulating and melting and glaciers and so forth. Thawing of permafrost as well. I mean, all this is you know, water related. So if climate changes, all the water related aspects also change, and therefore that impacts on us. It impacts on ecosystems, on the health of ecosystems, on biodiversity, and the availability of water from freshwater ecosystems, but it also impacts hugely on the man-made infrastructure. And we can just, we've seen this very recently through flooding events throughout Europe and other parts of the world. But we also see that there's a large impacts on energy production, on food production, as we said, on water supply. And we can also see changes also to water quality in this regard. So we saw from this word cloud that many people really understand the importance of water and how climate is impacting on water. So therefore, with the reverse logic, addressing water is also a way of adapting and coping with changing climate. Now, why haven't we done more in that regard up till now? Well, I'm not sure I have a very deep understanding of that, but my feeling is that there's been a large focus on mitigation up to this point, and now there's a growing attention to adaptation. And I think that even if water does contribute to mitigation, I think that the larger work on water is in the field of adaptation. And with also the increasing number of floods and extreme events and the intensity of these around the world, I think the awareness of the need for adaptation and to adapt also through improved water management has come higher up on the agenda. That would be my response. Back to you, Johannes.
Thanks a lot, Joachim, for your thoughts on that. And I think I can feel it in this COP. I've been to various COPs now in my work for the German government, but also for the World Meteorological Organization. And I think that really particularly this COP, I can feel this openness to debate really the substance of adaptation and resilience more, whereas this debate in the past COPs was very formalized on text in agreements, or whether we should discuss paragraph 1 or 2 first or so. And I have really the feeling that this COP is a bit different in its spirit and in its Grundgefühl, as we say in German, where there is no English word for that. I'm sorry. It is the base feeling. It's something, that you cannot really express very clearly in English. So I think we are getting there, and that makes me very hopeful. We have seen that through the launch of this coalition now, the Water and Climate Coalition, on Monday, where we had an immense media response. Just for a launch event without a document or a report or so, where we had presidents coming to speak about that, and I think that gives it the urgency that it deserves. Now, we also know that it doesn't help to talk nicely about it and to have presidents talking about it, but we need to translate that into the daily lives, which means into socioeconomy and people's behavior. And let's start with socioeconomy or economy. And we have Tom Williams online. So Tom, you organize businesses that want to engage in sustainable development worldwide. Can you explain a little bit what are the interesting bits in the sustainability debate around water and climate for the private sector, and how we need to think sustainable development in such terms that private sector can actually say, it's not only corporate social responsibility, and we're not just green painting our normal business operation, but we're actually really trying to go from extractive economic systems to more inclusive systems where we can shift to what is the green growth debate, where the word growth is maybe still even a bit misleading, because we need to transition from extractive systems where we just burn resources and consume natural resources to systems where we have an inclusive recycling system. Now my screen went black, and if we can just get from the technicians, audio is fine, and we will have everything back online in a second, they tell me. So Tom, at the moment I cannot see you, but maybe you want to just introduce in a minute where you work, and I think people can hear you. If you want to start speaking, then we will have you online, I hope, within a couple of seconds. Tom, floor is over to you.
Great, thank you, Johannes, and hello, everyone. Great to be part of this discussion this evening, and also the ongoing discussion about private sector engagement in the Water and Climate Coalition. A quick intro to Wbcsd. We are the leading business platform for sustainability with over 200 member companies, and we've been active in the water space now for over 15 years. And what we're increasingly seeing with companies, our members and other companies, is that they're addressing water as part of their climate strategies. And as well as the progress we're seeing with corporates setting net zero commitments and targets, we are also seeing a growing number of companies set nature positive targets. And of course, water sits between these two areas. So from the climate perspective, companies are looking at the impacts of floods and droughts with their own operations and their supply chain. And from a nature perspective, companies are looking at their impacts and dependencies on fresh water. So a number of those words that came up in the word cloud earlier are issues that companies are grappling with. And we're seeing an increasing number of companies adopt science-based targets for climate. Science-based targets for nature are in development. And then we also have frameworks such as TCFD and the emerging TNFD, which essentially give guidance to how companies should disclose climate and nature-related information respectively. Now, what's critical for science-based targets and the disclosure frameworks is data. Good data is needed to understand and progress towards science-based targets, and to assess risks and opportunities in a robust way, you need good data. And generally what we hear from companies is that there is a challenge when it comes to water-related data. And there are three key perspectives here. So one, just a general lack of available data. And I think if you look at the latest report on SDG 6 from earlier this year, it highlights a number of significant data gaps. Just looking at SDG 6.3, for example, which looks at wastewater, I think only about 50% of countries currently consistently collect wastewater data, and only 16 countries have data on industrial wastewater. Secondly, companies need more granular data. Where we do have global data sets, they are useful in providing sort of a very high level bird's eye view. But when it comes to prioritizing high risk areas, when you need to zoom in on a basin or a watershed level, there often isn't the data sets or tools to do that. And then thirdly, the need for connecting data points across different realms. So for example, most companies will look at fresh water availability, maybe they'll look at water quality parameters, but more and more companies are seeking soil moisture data or water productivity data for specific crops. So we certainly need a big global effort on data, both in terms of the architecture and in terms of how it's used and shared. And the private sector has a clear incentive to collaborate in this space. And this data point leads on to a second area where I see the private sector seeking collaboration, and that is place-based engagement. And I think this is an area where companies have really made some progress in the last decade or so. Many of the leading water using companies are engaging in multi-stakeholder platforms at a country level, a basin level, or a city level, but it's not at the scale which it needs to be in terms of locations and number of countries engaging in place-based collaboration. So many companies have prioritized where they need to engage, but getting down to the nitty-gritty of local engagement can often be challenging. So finding the right entry point, who are the right partners, making sure there's a governance model in place, for example. So if we can stimulate more place-based collaborations for the private sector to engage through the Water and Climate Coalition, I think that will be a great help to the private sector to increase their engagement on water and climate.
Thank you, Tom. I think we've had a good start into this debate in the past couple of weeks. We have actually already had a couple of webinars on this, and I have met here in the COP also another couple of further companies who are really interested and open to go into this debate and into saying, okay, how can we create business models that will not in the end drain away our future baseline possibilities for making business. I mean, it is very clear, if you have a non-renewable resource, you can feed as long as you can feed on it, and you can maybe recycle iron ore, but it's difficult to recycle a glacier or other water resources that are not replenishing at the speed that we're using them, and what that leads to, we can see that in the US, in the Midwest, where farmers have issues. I have been asked by the German government to think about water as a resource now. So even in Central Europe, we shift our view towards water as a commodity and resource, where traditionally it was just always there to be used, and even subsidized in many very stupid ways, I must say. But of course, that's a personal view about the stupidity of subsidies. So I want to go to Valentin. Valentin Eich works in the Global Water Partnership, and he's really that expert that we need to link our a bit nerdy technical capabilities in service delivery to the political debate in countries, to the impact that we need to do together in terms of shaping policies, in terms of acting differently. Now I see different pictures again here in Glasgow. Can we get Valentin to speak? Valentin, are you online?
I am online. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but we can't see you yet. But you can just start, and the technicians here are expert people. They will have you on display in a minute. Here you are. Go ahead.
Thanks
please.
a lot, Johannes. Since GWP is the voices of water for the whole world, this is not as bad if you can't see me but hear me. So thanks a lot for the question. And actually, GWP is founded with the aim of this interdisciplinary cooperation that you referred to. So we have over 3,000 organizations as partners in 179 countries. And the network has 69 accredited country water partnerships and 3 regional water partnerships around the globe. So, and yeah, to make this clear, this is a challenge and an opportunity at the same time, because we need to make sure that nobody is left behind and that all voices are heard and integrated for water for action, as you already referred to. And for us at GWP, this means not only this horizontal integration, but also a vertical integration. And vertical in that sense mean that we just do not stay on the global level or even the regional level, but we really integrate the national and the local level. And as I already mentioned, GWP has this network of 13 regional water partnerships, 69 accredited country water partnerships, and then over 3,000 partners in the countries that are working on with some aspect on water. And of course, we need this holistic approach to really cover all aspects of water. And the horizontal aspect that I was referring to means include exactly that we include all types of stakeholders for water with a people-centered approach. And our partners range from government organization, international organization, NGOs, academia, private sector, you name it. And we feel, and this is what drives us, that we bring together all these people to work together on a sustained way for water resources. Yeah, and this integration for water holds even more for the most vulnerable and marginalized groups, which are hit first and foremost by the adverse effects of climate change that Joachim has also mentioned. And we know that the challenges of the SDG 6 on water resources, the Sustainable Development Goal on water resources, cannot be solved by experts and politicians alone. But we need to hear all aspects, and we need to learn from all groups to come to the right solutions and be sure that nobody is left behind. And we also heard in the survey, people think about droughts and floods and hydroclimatic extremes. And yeah, together with WMO, GWP maintains these 2 programs on integrated flood and drought management. And for these 2 programs, for flood APFM and for drought IDMP, we have for each 35 partners from different sectors, and all these perspectives, these different organizations from international level to national level, from academia to NGOs and to business partners, are very important to understand and manage the risk of these extremes in an efficient way. So no organization can do this really alone. And this is what GWP stands for. And I invite you to look into floodmanagement.info or droughtmanagement.info on the web to learn more about this integrated approach. And this is also why we as GWP are so strong supporters of the Water and Climate Coalition, because it's an open and action-oriented community of like-minded members, as you say. And yeah, therefore we really are engaged and try to contribute. And perhaps just as a second part, this interlinking of water and climate that Joachim already so nicely explained why this is so important. This is also something that drives us, and often is forgotten that the Paris Agreement is actually with the second aim also for adaptation. And it says that the aim is to increase the ability to adapt to the adverse impacts of climate change and foster climate resilience. And I just want to reiterate how important this is. So over 80% of the national determined contributions of the countries have water resources as top adaptation priority. And this is a very good sign, but we need to, as you already mentioned, Johannes, implement this and support the countries in doing so. And therefore, our mission is to this vertical and horizontal integration that I already mentioned, in order to support the countries to fulfill the Paris Agreement in regard of adaptation. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Valentin, for this. I am very happy that we have this long-standing partnership with the GWP, because that's for us really the help to go down the last mile and to make an impact. Because the WMO in the end is a technical organization that works with technical counterparts in countries. So we need this wider engagement with Global Water Partnership, with World Business Council, and with other people to create really this multifaceted coalition that we need, or movement that we need to address the issue. And I want to maybe add it at this point, before I want to invite Eddie Moores to share his views. I want to maybe just insert here this little consideration that of all the greenhouse gas that we emit, CO2 is the most dangerous one, because it's got a very long half-life in our atmosphere. We talk about methane a lot in this COP, about forests, but really it's about decarbonizing our societies. The methane thing is nice, but it's a short-lived activity that will not change the long-term course of our environment. So decarbonizing is the important thing, bringing down the CO2 levels, or not having them to rise to levels where it will be really critical. We know that 40% or 30-something% of the CO2 goes into the ocean, is chemically absorbed by the ocean, and adds to ocean acidification, as we say in plain English. We don't want that. That's not good for us. Then we have 40% of the CO2 that remains in the atmosphere, that is the greenhouse gas effect, or part of the greenhouse gas effect, and warms us. We don't want that. And the rest of the greenhouse, or the rest of the CO2 that we emit, actually goes back into the biosphere and is absorbed on the land surface. And this part of the carbon cycle, where CO2 is absorbed on the land surface, is our best bet to really mitigate better climate change impacts. And we can only do that if we have ecosystems that are waterized, that are rich in organic material, that are rich in biosphere, that are not agricultural deserts, drained soils, or uplands where swamps have been drained, and where we then have erosion and flooding problems and all the stuff that comes with it. So for us, I think that's a super important notion that we need to keep in mind. And with doing that little propaganda in between, I want to hand the floor to Eddie. Eddie, you are the rector of IHE. You play a really important role with your institute and all the staff working there on educating the next generation to be able to resolve these issues that we've heard in the COP that we know about. Can you say a little bit from your perspective, what are the main driving forces, your main aims, and your main activities in this regard? Eddie, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Johannes. And of course, I think what you just mentioned about the changes that we need in the ecosystems supporting carbon uptake, I fully agree. I think the energy transition is another very important part in there. And what we would like to do also at IG is we try to combine it, but we are an institute that's working on water. So I limit myself a little bit to water today, and I very much appreciated what Valentin was saying about the NDCs, so the national determined contributions, because I think there it comes clearly on the table that we need to do something about adaptation, and that's also where we together with our partners would like to make a contribution to the Water and Climate Coalition. And to explain that a little bit better is that I think the link from those national determined contributions toward the SDGs is an important one. And you will see in some of the contributions from the countries that already make this link, but we think that's important to do that. And I think water is so important because the accelerator framework that we spoke about already, where Joachim also spoke about, is also started up because water is key to the other SDGs. So if we're not able to solve the problem for the SDG 6 or the water SDG, then we will also not be able to solve the other ones. And I think those are very strongly linked then to climate change, and that comes on the table through the national determined contributions. So what we think is important is that from this international commitments that are there, that the countries are making, we would like to see how that links up to the national contributions, and how can you then make sure that there is action on the ground. And the action on the ground will take place because primarily this national contribution to the international commitments. And what we would like to do from the Water and Climate Coalition, from our partnership in there, is we would like to help member states and countries to make data available. And then I'm not only talking about data that have been measured, but also about projections. So data coming from the different models that are there. And that was also mentioned by Tom. Hey, you then need, in some cases, you need local data. We think that we can help to improve those assessments. So we are also looking for member states and countries that are interested to see how we can help them to say sort of climate proof their national determined contributions into their countries and into local actions. And then we think that with the 5 pillars of the acceleration framework, we think that we can help them to make a step forward. So that's about making data available. It's about extracting the information from that data that you need to strengthen these national commitments that they have and how they want to do that. And we think that through the other pillars like capacity development and financing and governance and innovations, we can help them to make sure that at least a part of those plans will be realized within the coming years. And we think that's really needed. So we think that this speeding up, this acceleration is required, and we think we can do that and help there by helping countries in starting with the data and the information, but then also seeing how with the other accelerator pillars we can help them to really implement it and make sure that action will be there on the ground.
Thank you, Eddie. I think all those points are really important for us, and I want to top it up a little bit. We did an analysis 2 years ago in the WMO. If we would continue educating water and climate experts at the rate we have done it in the past 20 years, we would need another 20 years only to satisfy the need that we have today. So that does not work. We need more professionals that are equipped. I have been in the youth COP that happened before this grown-up COP, if you want, and one specific ask of the youth COP was help us, educate us, make us effective so that we can tackle the technical problems, but also that we can really participate in the process so that we're not just heard, that we're part of the process, that we can influence this process. And I think the IHE is one of the places where we can really work together to help the next generation to go beyond being let's make some noise around the future into let's be part to actually design and implement the future. So with that, I would like to turn to our live guest tonight. Sylvia, you work in UNICEF, and UNICEF's got this really big role and challenge in trying to make the world more livable, and you are known for children, but really you address a much broader constituency. And I know that you, because you have also brought a really cool climate agenda, where we want to know why water, sanitation and hygiene must be at the top of our minds. So I know you cannot see that online, but it's a really interesting piece. And can you give us a little bit of spiel on the importance of WASH in relation to mitigation and adaptation?
Sure, and thanks a lot. Let me start by saying that one of the critical things that the WASH sector, the water, sanitation and hygiene sector, has started to look at is to change perspective of how we look at this problem. Because at the end of the day, what do we want to achieve? UNICEF works in more than 100 countries, supporting governments and sector partners to really deliver water and sanitation services for the communities, trying to close the gap that we still have in SDG 6.1 and 6.0, right? So if we want to achieve this in a sustainable way, we cannot really stop thinking that climate is one of the major threats that we are facing for sustainable water and sanitation resources. And here we are not talking about the water as a resource. We talk about water as a service for the population that needs it in every single day. And we have seen how, for instance, the COVID pandemic has put even more relevance on the need of appropriate water, sanitation and hygiene, right? So what we have done as a sector has started to see how we can really build this capacity to really make the shift, the mind shift in becoming a climate resilient water sector, because there is no point to do water and sanitation services that are not climate resilient. We want them to be resilient. So for that, we have developed, indeed, with the partners with GWP, we have developed a framework with a lot of technical briefs, tools to do risk assessments. And we have been training government counterparts and sector partners in more than 80 countries at this time. And they are really using this framework to understand what are the main risks that they are facing as a sector for the climate impacts, and how they are going to address that in a sustainable way and in a climate resilient way. So to do this, we have developed these tools. We have developed partnerships like GWP, like CIWI, like yourself, WMO, like private sector, in order to bring more technical resources and more support to those countries. And I'm glad to say that more than 80 countries are already working under this perspective and delivering climate resilient solutions for communities, for children, that will be sustainable despite the changing climate. Because this is what the adaptation agenda is all about, that even if we arrive to make great commitments here in this COP or in the future COPs, still there will be a time where the effects of climate will be resented and people will suffer about that. And therefore it's important to deliver services that contributes to assure the sustainability of the water and sanitation in the communities, but also help to link their resilience as a community. For instance, we have activities that relates with multiple uses of water, where the water holes that are used in order to provide water services to the community are also used to do small micro irrigation activities, providing small scale livelihoods to households that are very vulnerable and very impoverished. And therefore, this is the way that we can not only construct resilience and build resilience as a service, but also in the communities that are benefiting from these services. And of course, with all the activities that comes with income generation activities and job creation, that of course prepare better those vulnerable communities in the most vulnerable countries that are not really bringing and being part of the problem, but they are suffering the problem, right? So this is the work that UNICEF is trying to support government and sector partners in all the countries where we work. We think that the contribution of water and sanitation to the climate agenda is huge, because just to start with the mitigation area, of course, since we are using and trying to move and shift towards renewable energies, of course, the amount of emissions for the sector itself is lower, but we look a lot of issues about efficiency. how we can reduce leakages, how we can increase the efficiency of the use of the water, recycling water, wastewater treatment. So if we are very efficient in the use of water, of course, the way to generate water as a service will be lower in terms of emissions. And of course, having an impact on the mitigation agenda. On the adaptation, I already explained it, is about providing services that will stay and stand up even in the case of climate shocks and extreme weather events. And of course, will help to build a resilient community. And also we contribute to the economic and social development, as I said, because it's a lot of income generation related activities as well as job generation. So with all this, I think that we really need to raise the profile of the water and sanitation in the climate agenda. And that's why, and linking with the first speaker, we are really trying to make it part of the NDCs. And we are successfully getting a lot of countries recognizing this and putting water and sanitation as their key climate agenda.
Thanks a lot, Sylvia. Yeah, I think this discussion is an important one about nationally determined contributions to the Paris Agreement, but also, of course, the national adaptation plans. And if you look at the national adaptation plans, especially, they're actually most of them are quite poor still in terms of the water component of them. In the NDCs, the nationally determined contributions to the Paris Agreement, this food and water nexus is the most important concern of countries, and yet in their national adaptation plans, that's pretty weak in terms of the implementation agreements or the aspirations to do something about that. So I think we have a big issue there, and we also have a big issue because that is still thought in terms of national boundaries. I mean, a national adaptation plan for Australia might work, but a national adaptation plan for Switzerland or Swaziland or so or Luxembourg, or name any other little country that has lots of interactions with their neighbors in terms of water or food or energy, all the big important issues, health, that will not work. So we need to come to a culture that we need to share the benefits of adaptation that we can create. But now I want to just look at the Mentimeter. So those here are some questions that we got during the panel discussion. So forests are high on the agenda here in Glasgow. What do you think we will need to arrange? Do we need a declaration to save and restore freshwater ecosystems? I think maybe this question could go to Joachim. Are you still on the line, Joachim? Do you want to give a short answer to this question?
Yes, thank you very much. No, this is an excellent suggestion. Let me first say this, that we already have that kind of agreement globally in SDG Target 6.6. So Target 6.6 is about the protection and restoration of freshwater ecosystems. And therefore, I think what we need is more commitment and a push to support countries and accelerate that work. We also now have recently a UN decade on ecosystem restoration, including freshwater ecosystems. So that's also a vehicle to help raise the profile of this work. So I think we don't need a new declaration, but what we need to do is commit to implement the ones that we have.
Good. So it is more in line with stop talking, start doing things, or what I have heard in this COP is be the change you want to see. I like that one. That's a really nice one. So we have enough agreements and we have enough tools. We just need to really grab our own noses and follow up on that stuff. There was a similar question that I saw online, but I think you have answered half of it. I don't know if you want to display that again, Chiara. Maybe Sylvia has another thought on the other question that was on the screen earlier. Can you bring the other question up again? Yeah, here's one. Yeah, maybe the pink and red questions are really maybe a context that Silvia could just reflect on a couple minutes, and then we are also almost close to the hour. So if you sit and moderate and our flies away quickly, if you have to listen, it can be long, and we don't want to keep people longer than until 7 p.m. here in Glasgow. So maybe Silvia, you can reflect on these two. And then I would like to give the people in the room a chance to just say something that we can record and that we can carry into the Water and Climate Coalition, or also for the panelists online to give a very short final statement. Silvia.
Yes, definitely about the water quality. Yes, it's one of the parameters that are integrated in the target 6.1 on access to safe water. We want to see access that is for everyone and leaves no one behind, access to water services and sanitation services. We want to see, of course, that the water has quality and then that the systems are sustainable. So this is integrated as a part of the definition in the 6.1 and 6.2. And for this, we have metrics and we have a system, which is the joint monitoring program that is the custodian agencies are WHO and UNICEF, that provides every 2-year reports on that. Said that, in terms of climate resilience, it's true that we need to be able to measure what is the impact of all these services in becoming climate resilience. How do we measure this climate resilience? And how do we measure the impact on climate resilience in communities? So we are developing with several stakeholders, but mainly University of Bristol is really the one leading on the thinking. And we have helped them, supported them to develop a framework to be able to measure that has been already tested in Nepal and Ethiopia, and we'll have another phase of wider field testing in order to see the potential suitability for this framework to be able to start these metrics and therefore be able to put targets and monitor the targets and the progress over time. So very good question. And the third one is how to address the cultural barrier against reusing treated wastewater. Yes, and I think that the barrier maybe it depends on of course on the area and on the space where we find ourselves. But there are I come from a country, Spain, where there is no barrier on that. I mean, all the water that we drink is mixed with recycled water by the water treatment plants, and therefore there is no choice but do that, because it's a water scarce area, all the Mediterranean zone, right? I think that in other places we can start by using the treated water by sectors like agriculture and other industrial sector that can really start using the water and then progressively move toward other solutions. So I think that definitely yes, there is need to look at this and work with behavior change programs. But we have achieved behavior change in a lot of very difficult things. I don't see any potential problem on this one. Over.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe just to add on that, I know that even in Germany, it's a sensitive issue to use, for example, sludge from wastewater treatments as agricultural fertilizer. So we have these cultural issues, and it's not that we sit in Europe and think other people might have them. We have them ourselves, and I think it's a real cultural, as the person said, it's a culture shift, and it's not easy to do that. It's why the good intention to create peace in Afghanistan failed, because we didn't think about how do we need to link to the local culture. We just thought, okay, we can bring alternative systems, hammer them in for 20 years, then leave and everything is fine. No, it's not working like that. And the same is for using feces in the end for food supply. I mean, this is a thing where we need to work over time. But I don't want to lecture you. That's not my role as a moderator. So is there anybody in the room who has a message for the coalition, or something that I can bring to my Secretary General, or that we can shout into the faces of decision makers? You have to use the mic. I'm sorry, because otherwise nobody online can hear.
I have 1 minute because I have to speak to the waterkeeper members around the country and around the world. And I'm going to emphasize this Climate Water Coalition initiative. And the point you made about the education is critical. The point about integrating the two disciplines is critical, particularly relative to metrics, because water projects are very much in the public's attention. They advocate these, but they don't pay attention to the climate implications of the projects.
That's exactly what we want to change with this initiative. We know that water without climate is a guess game, and climate without water is an ivory tower science that has no interest for people. So I think that's the purpose of what we're trying to do here. Thanks for that. I'll turn the floor over to our panelists for a short statement from whoever feels gifted to give us final wise words. So can we get all our panelists online in parallel? Can we see them all? Does that work technically? Yeah, here we are. So who wants to start? Just wave your hand. Okay, Tom, go first, please.
Thanks, Johannes. And really quickly, and I think this points to the potential strength of the Water and Climate Coalition. Going back to that question we had earlier on the forests, we've seen forest declarations in the past and they've not succeeded. I think what's different this time is that we're not necessarily following a multilateral process, but we're following a multi-stakeholder process. So the finance is available now in the forest to bolster up the forest declarations. We have the private sector engaged as well. And I do sense that we're moving from a multilateral era to a multi-stakeholder era. And I think this is where the Water and Climate Coalition, with its ambition to engage with multiple different stakeholders, has a real great opportunity to make sure that all different stakeholders are engaged, involved, that decision-making processes and action on the ground as well. So I think we're really moving into this multi-stakeholderism sort of era. And I think the Water and Climate Coalition is really well placed to serve that next step.
Thanks, Tom. Eddie, you were next.
Yes, I was also a little bit triggered about the question that was asked about what to do with treated wastewater and how you can actually get people to accept it. I was in a PhD defense yesterday about this topic in the city of Khulna in Bangladesh, where they also looked at that. And I think it was a very nice example that what you need there is an interdisciplinarity approach. Because it's about, of course, that people are aware of it, that they start to accept it, but you also need policies that allow you to use treated wastewater also on the different parts. You need techniques there, you need spatial planning, because in addition to treated wastewater, they also needed storage to make sure that you could use that water for peri-urban agricultural issues. So I think it was a really nice example how a topic like this brings together those different approaches and why those coalitions are so important with different partners.
Yeah, thanks, Eddie. Joachim, well, what's your message in short for what we should replicate here?
Well, one message is that nature is part of the solution and that we can use ecosystem-based adaptation, nature-based solutions to address and also mitigate climate change. I think that another message I have is that it's so important that we utilize new technologies, Earth observations, modeling, and similar tools that are globally available to bring this information down to the catchment and local levels to understand the causality. What is the effect of climate change on the water availability, and how does that also relate to land use changes and infrastructure and other types of water use changes? This information, and as we were talking a bit about data, but I would like to also stress that from our side, this is hugely important, and we have a lot of global and high resolution data available that can come to bear to this problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Joachim. Sylvia, what's your punchline?
For me, it's about our collaboration. I think that joining forces, it's for me the most critical part of this Water and Climate Coalition, because we come from a very fragmented sector, and we are definitely also putting a lot of barriers ourselves to do our good work on the ground. And I think that joining forces between all the data and knowledge that you have, all the experience that other agencies and groups have, our UNICEF operational capacity on the ground, where we can work and mobilize governments, communities, children, youth in more than 120 countries. Each of us have a lot of strengths, and this is a great opportunity to put all this together and really make something happen. Thank you.
Good, let's do that. My final intervention here is, and we have them online, to thank all the panelists. I think it's so good to see that even if we have these half online, half in person discussions, we can actually discuss and we can do things differently. So it is part of be the change you want to see. So I think it's cool to see we are operational. I think it's cool to see that the pandemic has not stopped the world from becoming a better place. Thanks all of you. Thanks team in Geneva. You have done a wonderful job in preparing this. Thanks also to the operators of this pavilion who worked tirelessly day after day to actually make this happen. Thanks for you in the audience to listen to us. And I hope that we will see each other again in the following years, and this collaboration and cooperation will grow. Thanks a lot and goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you and good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Video. She's the one that is there.